The Dallas Cowboys were blown out by the Eagles in Week 17. We'll break it down on this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we are breaking down the 41-7 loss by the Dallas Cowboys by the Philadelphia Eagles. Let's just start with this, Landon. What happened?
Wow. Yeah, it's funny because we talk about these games and one of the things I feel like we say a lot is we'll know early, right? You'll know early how this game is going to turn out. I don't think we knew early. I think early on in this game, it looked like this was going to be a ball game. The Cowboys, even when it was 7-7 after the ill-advised throw by Cooper Rush that caused a pick six, you felt like the Cowboys were still the dominant offensive force on the field. The Eagles had two possessions in which they went 3 and out. They weren't able to do anything. And the Cowboys were moving the ball, despite having no CeeDee Lamb and having Cooper Rush in a quarterback. And then, the wheels just seemingly came off. The Cowboys continued to turn the ball over. It gave the Philadelphia Eagles a lot of opportunities. They missed a field goal. That also gives Philadelphia a good field position. And eventually, the offense, sort of kind of took hold. The run game started to kind of rear its head against our defense. And then it just became, it got ugly quickly, really. By halftime, it was ugly. And it was crazy how it went from a very reasonable game in the first quarter, which honestly is not very different from a lot of Philadelphia Eagles games if you've watched them. But it went from very close to not very close in just a quarter.
Well, so it started out the first drive. The Cowboys were moving the ball down the field. Cooper had the really bad throw on the pick six. Now what I really liked about it is the next drive, they battled back, right? They go right down the field. They score a touchdown and it's 7-7. Where I feel like this game turned, Landon, is we're in the second quarter. The game is again 7-7 into the second quarter of this game. And the Cowboys have a 3rd and 1, and Rush makes a deep shot to Jonathan Mingo and it's incomplete. And rather than trying to run the ball there or even just going for it on 4th down from 4th and 1, the Cowboys punt. And like 2 plays later, the Eagles are already at the spot where the Cowboys punted. They score a touchdown. Ferguson fumbles on the next play. Philadelphia gets a field goal. This game is 17-7. And that's how quick it turned. I really wonder, if Dallas picks up that first down, let's say they even get a field goal and they go up 10-7. I bet you we have a different game here.
Maybe, but I think, there's also the opportunity that the Cowboys, find a way to do this just even a little bit later in the game and it kind of falls all apart. But I do think that 3rd and 1 play is kind of a fulcrum, where you feel like that the game sort of changed a little bit. And I'm looking at the situation, I guess I understand in some sense, you don't think that the Eagles would be expecting something like that, and so the element of surprise element that on that call, I think is something that you do sometimes on 3rd and 1s, but normally in situations where maybe you go for it on 4th and 1, or I think really the problem with it, and the reason it was so surprising, and you were maybe even trying to use the element of surprise, is because you don't have CeeDee Lamb, you don't have Dak Prescott, and you were moving the ball efficiently in the short passing game and with the run game. That's why I think it was so surprising is, you're looking at the game, Dowdle was already kind of getting going at that point. He just needed 1 yard. I understand the idea of, taking the shots when you've got him. And I think if, Mingo was just running his route a little bit closer to the sideline, or if Rush throws the ball a little bit more inside, then you probably have a touchdown. But it was a very kind of high leverage moment to be trying that. And certainly not when you were not quite in scoring position, really.
Yeah, there's a lot of different angles we're going to talk about in this game. But one of the things that we said in our Friday preview, Landon, is without CeeDee Lamb, you're going to need some of the other veteran players to step up. And I thought Brandon Cooks did a good job in this game.
He did.
I thought he did a good job of beating Darius Slay. Jalen Tolbert had the nice touchdown, but one of the players that we highlighted was Jake Ferguson. We thought this needed to be a big Jake Ferguson game because of the cloud coverage that Vic Fangio has. 3 catches for 18 yards and a fumble. I mean, and it was, unfortunately, this has been kind of what we've been used to seeing from Ferguson this year. It's been a very, very, very disappointing third season in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think looking back at the season, as far as not just excluding injuries and all the kind of circumstantial stuff, just based on like performance versus expectation, right? We always have rushing versus expectations. Just as far as performance over expectations, I could not be more surprised with the way Jake Ferguson's season went. Obviously, he dealt with some injuries at certain points, but this game was really kind of indicative of the larger issues that he's had in the season, where he can't make the play where you need it. He's not breaking tackles like he used to. Fumbled the ball in a high leverage moment when you really can't afford to do stuff like that. It's just been a really tough season, and it kind of makes you think. You've seen a little bit from some of the down roster guys, but is it enough that you feel like you've got enough at tight end now? Or has that become another position that you need to start considering in a long list of needs for 2025?
I was hopeful that this year Ferguson could develop into that number 2 option in the passing attack outside of CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah.
He's the guy that could win one-on-one matchups, and that's how you would be able to get away with your offense, despite not having like a Jordan Addison or a T. Higgins or a Devontae Smith as that number 2 receiver. It would be Ferguson that would be a focal point of the offense. I mean, he's at 480 yards and 0 touchdowns this year. We're going into week 18 now.
Yeah, it's a problem, and like we said, we'll probably do a deep dive into the kind of what went wrong, especially early with this offense while Dak was still going on. I think we'll talk about the young offensive line. I think we'll talk about, some of the problems that they had with running the ball because of the young offensive line. But we cannot overlook the fact that Ferguson taking a sizable step back from where he was the year before didn't have a major effect, especially since the Cowboys were kind of counting on him taking that same sort of sizable step, except forward, in order to kind of buoy the offense to where they needed it to be.
I did want to mention Cooper Rush in this game. 15 of 28, 147 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Just not a good matchup for him. And his 3 games against the Eagles, he's really struggled. It's clear Philadelphia's got a beat on what he wants to do. I thought for the most part, Cooper Rush is giving you like high-end backup quarterback production, but this is what happens with backup quarterbacks. The more they play, kind of the more they get exposed, and this is one of those games.
Yeah, and it's kind of just, I mean, it's obviously probably not coincidental that both of the big, really bad Cooper Rush games came against the Eagles, like you mentioned. It did feel like early in the game when they were in their game script, they had no problem moving the ball. They were getting guys open. I thought specifically Brandon Cooks was just destroying Darius Slay at certain points early on these kind of comeback and out routes and that sort of thing. He's just getting out of his breaks better. And it just felt like, at a certain point, they started sort of kind of panicked, especially after the Ferguson fumble. It really felt like the offense just kind of totally went into a shell. And that's when you just started seeing kind of more frantic passing, and just the connection that had been, going on early in the game was just lost. And Rush just was playing with a lot of frantic play. And ultimately, I think that's why they felt better about kind of putting Trey Lance in. I think that the line that they've been, saying for not playing Trey Lance is, well, Cooper Rush gives you a better opportunity to kind of view some of these younger guys and gives them a better chance to kind of operate in the offense. But I think by the end of that game, that just did not become true anymore. And that's why they pulled him and put Trey Lance in.
And again, I mean, Cooper Rush did not play well, but there was no CeeDee Lamb. Jake Ferguson fumbled. Rico Dowdle fumbled. The offensive line was a mess all day long. So there are reasons for his struggles. It just also wasn't a good day from Cooper Rush. We could say that as well. Let's talk about the Cowboys defense. They didn't quite give up 41 points because the offense gave them 7, but this is not a banner day by Mike Zimmer's unit. Let's get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions that you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? I know that it's definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize that I was still paying for, and Rocket Money has made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions. It'll help you monitor your spending. It'll help you lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals that you want to hit this new year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That is rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are breaking down the Cowboys' 41-7 loss to the Philadelphia Eagles. Let's talk about the defense because, Landon, they started this game really well. They went back-to-back 3-and-outs. Philadelphia did not get their first down of the game until the 11-minute mark in the second quarter. But then it fell apart. What happened?
Yeah, I think that's what's going to be interesting to kind of go back and watch because it did just seem very sudden. I mean, honestly, even after they scored their first offensive touchdown, it felt like they really needed a lot of help to get down the field. They got I think at least one penalty that really helped them move down the field. And then after that, it just felt like they started playing find the booth, right? They find out where 25 was lined up and whoever was lined up on him, whether it was Smith or Brown, they were throwing the football to him, not even just Smith and Brown at times, right? And I think ultimately we've been living on the edge a lot with the Cowboys and their health, especially in their defensive backfield. They've been playing a lot of good football. Once you lose Trayvon Diggs on top of the other guys that you had lost, I think we quoted it last week, right? Like seven cornerbacks that have played over 100 snaps so far this season. Yeah. At a certain point, you're down to cornerback 9 and 10, and you're going against guys that are Pro Bowlers and borderline Pro Bowlers. So I think, I was surprised early that the Cowboys were kind of able to hold them in check the way that they were. I understand that Kenny Pickett is still Kenny Pickett. I think he kind of proved a little bit of that today. But I also think that I was shocked to see that they didn't have more success throwing the football when they had opportunities. The Cowboys were actually able to get pressure at certain points. The Eagles' offensive line was, penetratable. And then I think at a certain point, I think it wasn't even until I'm pretty sure that Saquon Barkley only got his first carry with 2 minutes left to go in the second quarter, until the second quarter. So I think the Cowboys were able to kind of hold them in check. And then once they were able to figure out Booth was on the field, they targeted him in the passing game, and then they started obviously figuring out they needed to give the ball to their MVP candidate every once in a while, and that started to have an effect on the Cowboys defense as well. But I thought that a couple different guys, I thought the defense kind of looked good at certain points, but after the kind of well broke in the run defense and the Cowboys continually giving the ball away, there's only so much the Cowboys defense could do, and it just kind of was like all the dam breaking all at once, frankly.
They put Deron Bland on AJ Brown because they didn't have anybody that could match up physically with AJ Brown, and maybe it took the Eagles a couple drives to realize, oh, that means Andrew Booth is on the outside with Devontae Smith. There was just no chance. Once they found that matchup, I saw some other people on Twitter why don't the Cowboys play somebody else besides Andrew Booth? And it was like, who? They were down. If you go through the numbers, Trayvon Diggs, Kalen Carson, Josh Butler, Kamon Hall. They were down to Troy Pride, who is a slot corner that they tried to throw out there. Izzy Mukamu, who has only played slot corner and safety. They just didn't have any other options. And this is kind of what happens when you have so many injuries condensed at one spot and you go up against a really, really good number 2 receiver. I'm not sure what else they could have done here.
Yeah, it kind of felt like it was like this at a certain point at the defensive end position, but then a whole bunch of people started to get healthy in the second half, and that's why you were even seeing some of the resurgence at that spot. But cornerback, it's like it felt like even when it was getting healthy, it was 2 steps forward, 1 step back, right? Like you get Bland back, you lose Diggs, they get like, again, it's just, you feel like you're never going to get your 3 starting corners to play longer than a game or 2 at a time. So and again, it was worse than that, right? It's like, it's not like you were just losing 1 or 2 here. You were missing both of them at one point, and one after the other. And then now on top of that, even the guys behind those guys were getting hurt. And so, Booth was a guy that obviously they knew that was going to be a problem when they threw out there. And I think, he showed you some physical stuff, but he's just not able to kind of keep up with some of the especially the more slippery guys. So it was kind of a losing cause. And then at that point, when they knew that they could throw the ball like that, it became more difficult to defend the pass, because any kind of resources you have to put out to help Booth, it's one less guy in the box to defend Saquon Barkley in the run. And it just kind of snowballed at that point.
Well, and then by the second half, the offense just couldn't sustain drives at all. So the defense was just gassed. And by that time, they were playing some guys that probably shouldn't have been out there playing. And that's why I actually think for the most part, they did a really good job of containing Saquon. Saquon got like 31 carries in this game.
He did, yeah.
There were a couple late runs that happened like in late in the fourth quarter that maybe skew the numbers a little bit, because I thought for the first 3 quarters of this game, that the Cowboys did an adequate job of slowing him down.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It wasn't like watching the early season run defense. They were doing, especially considering who they were playing, right? I mean, this is still the Philadelphia Eagles, right? Like, this is still one of the best run blocking offensive lines in all of football, and they were holding their own. There wasn't like enormous holes that Barkley was running through. In fact, if anything, it was probably one of the more skilled, difficult games that Barkley's had to play. I mean, there's lots of kind of being
Barkley played well himself. Yeah, it wasn't because there was massive holes opening up.
No, it was lots of getting stopped behind the line of scrimmage, kind of hesitating, breaking back outside, and beating everyone to the corner. And so it's like, which is just I mean, that's Saquon Barkley. Sometimes that's going to happen to you. So I think if you feel like maybe if Overshown was in this game, maybe it would have been a little bit more of an effect of being able to kind of get outside and be a little bit more athletic on the second level. But honestly, I thought that for the most part, especially early in the game, they obviously early in the game he didn't touch the ball, but at the point early in the game when he was touching the ball, I thought the Cowboys defense did a really good job. Can I throw in one thing real quick, just because I feel like we missed it in the last segment? I don't want to forget to point out that Rico Dowdle on the other side also had a very solid game. As one of the guys, he did have a fumble and the Cowboys lost, but he crossed 100 yards, was back to kind of his solid ways after kind of not having a great week against Tampa. And he also crossed 1,000 yards for the season, which I thought is a notable thing that we should mention. Pretty amazing considering the fact that they didn't even have him as the best running back until about halfway through the season. So I just wanted to make sure we commented on that before
it's unfortunate that he had the fumble, because I thought he played really well this game. I thought he had a chance to score a touchdown on that drive before he fumbled. But I mean, in a season that's been filled with not very many bright spots, he's been one of them. And whether the Cowboys bring him back next year or not, he's had a really good year. He's the first undrafted free agent running back ever for the Dallas Cowboys to rush for 1,000 yards. And the fact that he really didn't get a lot of run until November is pretty impressive.
Yeah, just really an impressive season for him. And you said it. I think we all would have been surprised to learn that Rico Dowdle, for the majority, if you've been told this before the season, that Rico Dowdle would be a major part of your offense for a good portion of the last half of the season. I think you would have been surprised. I think you would have been even more surprised to learn that the Cowboys were winning games with him, right, and no Dak Prescott. So kudos to the run game and Dowdle. At least that's one as a bright spot, but not a lot of bright spots outside of that on offense or on defense at all, frankly.
All right, so let's talk about what's next. The Cowboys have 1 game left going into Week 18. We'll talk about where they're currently drafting, who's going to be playing next week. We'll get to that next. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL show, available wherever you get your podcast. It's Tony Wiggins. It's Tyler Rowland, 2 times every single day. Again, check it out wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Landon, so the Cowboys will take on the Washington Commanders in Week 18. We're actually recording this during Sunday Night Football. Right now, the Falcons are up 17-14. But The Cowboys obviously have nothing to play for. We'll see about Washington. Do we think the Cowboys, now that we're going into the final week of the season, do we think they sit more guys, kind of knowing their fate? We've already seen them put CeeDee Lamb on the injured reserve list. Do you think some guys like Micah Parsons, who clearly still isn't 100%, maybe Tyler Guyton, do we think some of those guys just don't play next week?
Yeah, I've started to become paranoid, I think, because covering this team has started to make me paranoid. And I think I saw that announcement or the series of tweets that said that Micah Parsons took a shot from Saquon Barkley during the game, that he was really sore. And I started immediately thinking, man, they're really setting us up for something in the week 17 where his rib soreness, he can't play. I do wonder that. I mean, look, here's the worst part about all this is that what you don't want is in a meaningless season in which you are trying to, not meaningless, but you know what I mean, a season of no consequences as far as the playoffs go. You don't want to see, God, especially in a week 17 game, Micah Parsons tear an ACL. I mean, just think about how terrible it would be to have a season-long injury at the end of a season like this, right? Like, yeah. and then to potentially lose them all of next year, right? I do think that there is probably some thought to like some of the guys like that. If they're not 100%, let's maybe lean into that a little bit more. And the kind of, what do they call it? The natural tank. And like, you don't need to necessarily win that game, but, and not that you're not going to go out there and try to win the game, but the natural tank comes in. Well, if a player is a little bit banged up and you don't want to see him get fully injured, you sit him down and you see what you got in your young guys for that game. So I wouldn't be shocked to see that. At the same time, Mike McCarthy is still very much fighting for his gig. I think that the Cowboys would like to play spoiler for Washington a little bit.
Is he fighting for his job? I watched. I think Adam Schefter. I watched Adam Schefter this morning talk about how Mike McCarthy is going to have plenty of options after the year. So it's more about whether he wants to come back to Dallas or not, rather than the Cowboys wanting to bring him back.
It was nice for Adam to talk to us right after he got off the phone with Mike's agent. I think that but he's not wrong. I don't think. Like, I mean, listen. Part of the reason that we have the conversations that we've had, and I'm sure there are so many Cowboys fans that are watching us and screaming at us, like, right now, probably screaming at me right now about even suggesting Mike McCarthy coming back. But the truth of the matter is that it's not wrong. It's not like Mike McCarthy doesn't, even with what's happening right now, it's not like Mike McCarthy doesn't have a great track record. He won 36, we keep saying it, 36 games in 3 years, right? And even this year, I think you could easily spend, if you're a good agent, I'm sure whoever Adam was speaking to could tell you that, like, this was a pretty decent performance considering what the hand that he was dealt with, the injuries, and also, frankly, the Joneses. So I think that's the kind of why the conversations that we had like just a few days ago, where is Mike McCarthy going to be going to have some leverage here to get more money out of the situation because of what he's done? Like, we may be looking at this as fans in a completely wrong way to just suggest that Mike would be lucky to come back to the Dallas Cowboys. Mike might have better situations with more money at different teams. Sure. I understand there's only 32 of these, but Mike McCarthy's not like a guy that has failed out of this job necessarily. The standard is just very high, and at a certain point, you just have to kind of move on. So
I want to ask you this. We were talking about this pre-show. The Cowboys have had a really fun month and a half, basically. The game before Thanksgiving, right? They beat Washington the week before Thanksgiving. So from that point until week 17, it's been competitive, good football. Does this blowout loss to Kenny Pickett and Tanner McKee erase all that goodwill?
I don't know. I don't think it does necessarily. I think the sample sizes are larger. I mean, they've played a month worth of solid play, and even in this game, it wasn't like the Cowboys quit, or we're playing a lesser team. They continued to start playing some more and more difficult teams, starting with a few weeks ago with the Bengals. Last week with Tampa was, I thought, a step up in the competition for the Cowboys as they're currently constructed, played, right? And this is just this is a playoff team that's vying for, the number one seed. They're not, they may not get it, but like they're in that echelon of the NFC teams right now. And then we played them at home and they had something to play for. We thought that the Jalen Hurts injury situation would make this a lot closer game than it was. And I think that's maybe played itself out early in this game. But what you can't do is you can't turn the ball over the way the Cowboys did in this game. You're not good enough to overcome that. Right, you're only good enough to win the game by playing clean and then getting a couple breaks. So I don't know that that Mike necessarily should be held to account because Cooper Rush doesn't see a robber when Ferguson was running free on a crossing route. He could just caught the ball and ran right into the end zone for a touchdown. Cooper, sorry. But yes, no, I don't think that I blame Mike for that. And I imagine that the Cowboys fans, they're probably upset and they should be upset with the way the season has gone. But if you were okay with Mike McCarthy last week, I don't know that this changes because of this game this week.
I just have a hard time getting too upset when Devontae Smith and AJ Brown are beating Troy Pride and Andrew Booth at cornerback. It's just, I don't know. Maybe that's just because I'm broken inside, but it just doesn't really mean that much to me either way. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're trying to fight for pride here, and if it doesn't work out that way, it's hard to be mad when the Cowboys are just, the season is so far behind the 8 ball that it's not like they're coming back by winning this game. There's not a lot on the line. Either way, I just want to see guys fight hard and play hard. And I do think that we've seen that. I think that's the one thing we can say for Mike McCarthy is that these guys have played hard and they've played well at good points.
Last thing, Tankathon update. Right now, the Cowboys would be drafting at pick 13 if the season ended today. They could still move up in the draft order, assuming they lose to Washington in week 18. The Colts play, I believe, Jacksonville. They're one spot ahead of them. Man. The 49ers, they play the Lions and the Cardinals. If the 49ers get one win, the Cowboys can jump them as well. The highest that I can see right now the Cowboys can get up to is pick 11. Even if they were to win next week, I think they could go down to pick 15 or 16. So you're looking at a range from 11 to 16 as to where the Cowboys will be drafting.
Get ready for some Luther Burton takes. Get ready for some
Ashton Genty is going to be just the bane of my existence all season long.
You're just going to hear it all season long. Get ready for it, guys. And that's what the talk's going to be.
I gotta admit, I did watch some Emeka Egbuka today as I was watching some games. So already starting on some draft content with 1 week to go. Go check out the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. We'll be back on Tuesday to talk more about this game. I guess we have to. It's the last show of the year before we get to 2025, when maybe the Cowboys will have a new head coach. Maybe they're going to draft a running back in round 1. We'll see. We'll see, Landon. Go follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosier. Enjoy your Monday. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.